So funny enough, I, Tonya is like one of the first ever movies that I reviewed. My first review was like, I believe, Disaster Artist back in 2017. Then I did like Call Me by Your Name, and I, Tonya was one of the movies I reviewed, and I just remember loving it. It's one of my favorite movies, so it had to be on this list because nobody really talks about I, Tonya, funny enough. So here we are. So obviously we know I, Tonya stars Margot Robbie, Sebastian Stan, Allison Janney, Paul Walter Hauser, so many different names, but honestly, this movie should not be as good as it is on paper. Because I remember I watched this at a film festival back in 2017. I was like, yeah, I, Tonya, like, I'm just going to watch it because I have a pass. And I remember everybody was just like, taken aback as to how good this is, and honestly, like, it's pretty spotless in my opinion. First things first, I'm going to talk about one of my most annoying things in film. One is exposition. I hate exposition scenes so much. It's so ironic that Christopher Nolan is like my favorite director, and like his biggest flaw is exposition. But one of my second ones is narration. I hate narration in film because I feel like it's just an excuse for you to tell me the story instead of just showing me. It just looks kind of it just comes off very off to me. But I do like when films do find clever ways to add narration to almost add another element to the story, and this is another example of that with these interviews that each of these characters do in their own unique way, which is based off of like actual like testimonies and actual interviews that they did give back in the 90s. I loved it, and I love exactly how they implemented it in this film. Even looking at Tanya's mom's like interview with like the bird, you're like, this is just like so wacky. But then when you see the real footage, you know, at the end of the movie where she actually has a bird on her actual shoulder, it just makes everything feel a bit more authentic. I want to talk about the performances because I think the performances are probably the best part of this film. Margot Robbie has her best performance ever, and I don't think she'll ever be able to top this because unless she does another dramatic, you know those dramatic movies that everybody makes for the Oscars, that the movie's not that great, but then like their performance is great. That's like the only way she can top this. The performance Robbie gives is dynamic to say the least. The moment that sticks with me the most is towards the very end where she's trying to put all of her makeup on, but she's trying to keep it together because everything that's been happening, you know, throughout the journey that we've experienced is a lot, and she can't keep it together, but she's trying her best while trying to do her makeup, looking into the mirror, but you know, we are like the POV of the mirror, and it's just, it gives you all the right chills. Oh, I, Tonya. Did you guys see that? It was I, Tonya on my screen. Sebastian Stan, quite frankly, has a pretty tough task on his hands, in my opinion. He plays a terrible character in Totally Galooly, and we kind of like him. I don't know, like, I think that's such a marvel for you to play like, this guy is diabolical in all sense of the word. And you kind of still, not that you root for him, but like, he's an interesting character at the end of the day. Paul Walter Hauser obviously steals the show in every scene he's in, you know, playing this dumb character in Sean Eckhart that's just, unfortunately, like, Paul Walter Hauser hasn't been able to like truly like move away from these type of roles. You even see he's like in Cobra Kai playing this like the same dumb character. He had this one movie with Clint Eastwood that he just had this last year. I cannot remember it right now. About the Olympic bomb and all that. That's like the only time he hasn't played a character like this, but he hasn't really been able to break away from a character like this. But this is the best iteration of that character he's been able to play, and it's just he's funny every time, and that's very hard. Like, you have the comic relief in every film, and like they're funny a lot of the times, but you know, there's one of those jokes that are like, yeah, you could skip that one. He's funny every time, and that's credit to the writing and to Paul Walter Hauser, and also Craig Gillespie as a director, who we'll talk about him later. Allison Janney, I mean, the Oscar like speaks for itself. I can't even put words into like how her performance is. I mean, the scene between her and Tonya at the dinner table, she throws a knife at her. You know she's a terrible person, but like, you're like connected to her. I don't know. Allison Janney's like, I love her. Like, I feel like she's my mom, but like actually not my mom. But like, I don't know how to explain it. I just love her in this. Like, she won the Oscar for a reason. Nobody else was gonna beat her. Like, she was just great. She is great. I love Allison Janney. But I think the scene towards the very end where Tonya is like having that moment with her mom that she thinks is pretty heartfelt, and then she finds out she has a recorder on her, pretty much exemplifies the whole film, in my opinion. Because in similar fashion to, you know, The Wolf of Wall Street, I, Tonya has this perfect balance of comedic moments that are actually funny, and then knowing when to switch to these dramatic moments that are actually heavy. I mean, you even see, during the montage where, Tonya is describing her relationship with Tony, and I mean, there's some messed up things going on through it that still feel like, okay, like it's giving, it's not saying, abusing your significant other is okay, but it is also funny on the other side to kind of not let it be too heavy on you, but then also knows when to also separate both of those feelings of it being funny, it being serious, so you don't have two conflicting moments at the same time. A film like this should not be, director heavy unless you're like a big name, one of those directors that but god damn it, Greg Gillespie is amazing from the director's chair in this film. I mean, look at the way he blends the interviews to the story, and he also uses them to add extra layers to these characters. I mean, look at the editing. The editing is phenomenal in this, and editing is so slept on in this film. It's pretty much a Scorsese film, editing wise in my eyes. I'm so shocked that Greg Gillespie has like no big thing he's attached to right now. I remember he got attached to a movie like the year after this, but like, he needs to be like one of those guys that's like, hey, when is this guy dropping something else? Steven Rogers needs to work for like Scorsese or Damien Chazelle, because this screenplay, in my opinion, is, for me, top 10 for me. I think it's spectacular. Every single story element like lands, like every single one, like none fails. I don't get that, like, and especially also being a biopic that some of the story elements are kind of fuddled in there. It does feel authentic and genuine at every moment, and I don't feel like anybody's gonna like leave this film like, maybe some of those things really weren't true. I still feel like Steven Rogers does a good job of bringing facts, and also like, having to blur some lines for story's sake. Because I mean, when you combine both what Greg Gillespie does with Steven Rogers' script, I mean, by the end of the film, like, the ending is heartbreaking. Like, you're rooting for this character the whole film, and then they're at rock bottom, and I don't know, I'm hurt every time I watch it. I've watched the movie so many times, and I'm hurt every time I see that ending, because you feel like she does deserve it. If you're somebody, you also feel like she doesn't deserve it if you're somebody, but at the end of the day, you do feel for the character and how she feels at the very end. And there's really two themes that kind of stick with me to the very end of the film. One being cancel culture. Tonya's character kind of like touches on it a bit in like one of the interviews about like how the media and how the general public, like, she can't do anything necessarily like big in her life anymore. By the end of the film, we see that she does like landscaping. This was, at one point the best figure skater in the world, and because of a story that she really has nothing to do with other than like being attached to the people in there, she's stuck, with pretty much nothing. And that's pretty sad to hear, because, I mean, it's 2020 and we still see that in everyday life and in different iterations. And that's pretty sad that almost 30 years later, we're still doing that. And the second one that I feel like is a bit more heavier, because it's been going on for way too long, is the scene where Tony is looking outside his window and he's seeing the press kind of pack up. And on the TV, we're seeing the OJ stuff starting to just build up. And it shows, like, it's pretty much an allegory to, like, we go to where the next story is, where the new big flashy story is, and at any moment you could be the biggest thing and just be another forgotten memory. Because if I'm being honest with you, I was born in 98. This stuff happened like 5 years before I was born, and I still had no idea about this story. But I know everything about OJ because, that's just a bigger story, and unfortunately, like, it happens. I mean, you can say it shouldn't happen, but that's just how America, media, and culture works. We're always looking for the next new thing to, occupy ourselves with. I don't know, man. I really love I, Tonya. It's one of my favorite films. Pretty spotless, in my opinion, other than, the terrible CGI that we have when Tonya's skating, which I can't give them too much flack for, because, it was either that or shoot around a stunt double, and then you don't really get all the emotions on their face, which is, you can guess what they were going for. And even the technology that they would have used, to get that facial, stuff, we saw in like The Irishman last year, and that was still, hell expensive and still wasn't perfect. So I can't give them too much flack for it, but I still have to, call it out, because it is like pretty distracting. So what did you guys think of I, Tonya? Did you guys love it? Think it was mad? Did you just not like it at all? Comment below. I will really want to know. Don't forget, next Thursday, 8th grade. 8th grade, look, just be prepared. It's not for the weak. even though you're gonna love it, it's not for the weak. Okay. See you guys next week. Ade. Peace.